It's Greg Banks with Greg Jones on the phone from Johnstown. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and yourself?
I'm doing fine, doing fine. Wanted to revisit a conversation you and I had a couple of months ago here on the Air Network about your son Kyfen, who was shot in the streets of Johnstown. Oh, of course, it's been about a year now, I believe, or
It will be a year, November 9th.
wow.
2016 was when he got killed, and we're coming up on a year. So before you know it, we'll be celebrating his life that day.
Okay, well, we wanted to revisit that because obviously there have been many shootings in the city of Johnstown. And last when you and I talked, we talked a little about Kyfen. We gave you a chance to tell us a little bit about him. In a follow-up, if you will, how's things going in Johnstown? I think there have been numerous shootings since that fateful day a year ago in November. And how are the people holding up and what's happening from a legal standpoint?
Well, we talk to the police all the time to try to get updates, and all we get really is things are moving. Now, I do have confidence that when the police tell me things are moving, I have confidence that they're telling me the truth. My heartburn is still with the district attorney. She is not the people's district attorney, the people who are on the right side of the law. I still have not personally met with her, have not had the opportunity, me or my family, to talk with her. And it just seems like, she has this attitude as if I dare you, question me about what's going on or what am I doing in this investigation. From my point of view, and even before my son got killed,
right,
I've always said she just acted like she didn't care, and that was my take on things concerning her.
And by the way,
there was no sense of urgency.
Yeah, Cambria County District Attorney is Kelly Callahan. She's been there for some years, and obviously we've had some dealings with her when I was in Johnstown over some cases that occurred there, and did have a chance to actually be in a group setting with her where 300 people showed up the night of, it was following the shooting of Elip Cheatham, when there were many questions involved in that. But let's go back and just revisit this. Now, from a district attorney standpoint, she's not made any kind of effort maybe to sit down with you and your family and tell you where this case is, one of many, I might add. And have you really tried to reach out to her and maybe set up a meeting or an introduction or anything like that?
I have tried to set up a meeting with her, but once again, she slaps us in the face and she sends one of her deputies. And I don't have a problem in meeting with the deputy, but the deputy is not who is responsible for Cambria County.
Right.
I want to talk to the district attorney and see what her plans are ahead. And for me, when I believe someone's not doing the right thing and they are an elected official, then we fight them at the ballot box.
Right.
And I know I've been beating her up pretty bad in the newspaper or on social media or, when I do radio interviews and different things like that. I personally don't have anything against her, but we're talking business here.
Yeah.
She is in the business of crime fighting, and I just don't think that she's doing what she can to prevent a lot of things. Now, with that being said, if these were murders in Westmont, Richland, stuff like that, then we have a task force here that you couldn't believe. Now, the focus here in Johnstown definitely are not these murders.
Right.
But the drug epidemic, since it is hitting these areas and the white kids are being just as affected as the black kids, then we have a task force out here sweeping up, for the drug dealers and the overdoses and different things like that. I mean, that's all good, too.
Yeah.
But we've lost some lives here, and we want justice and we want answers. And that's all we're saying. But we can't get her to realize that. It hasn't hit home with her, and I hope it never does. I hope she never has to wake up in the pain that I wake up with every day. And because I don't have my son.
Yeah, and apparently, I just want to touch on something when we talk about Westmont, Richland, those affluential, predominantly white areas, because that's what really it is. It's not a matter of racism, but if you look historically in the history of Johnstown, let's say over the last 40, 50 years, it causes you to think that perhaps if it were a black youngster or it came from a black neighborhood, they don't work as diligently as they would perhaps in the suburban areas. I guess that's the gist of what you're saying. And not to make it a racial matter, but ladies and gentlemen, it is. I think, and maybe they don't do it knowingly, or maybe it is systemic, apprehensiveness to go into those black areas and talk with these families. And all you're asking is for an audience, I guess, at this point.
Well, I'm going to say it, and I know I'm going to step on some toes.
And that's all right.
Now, I don't give her all the blame. We as a community have to step up and start speaking up.
Right.
See, we want to have it both ways. We want to say Black Lives Matter.
Right.
We want to get angry when the white cops shoot our young men or women. We want to protest. We want to stand up and do all these great things when it's the white police or when it's a white person who does this to us.
Mm-hmm.
But when we do it to ourselves, we sit silent.
Yeah.
How can we say Black Lives Matter when we are? It's our folks who are dealing the drugs in the community, giving it to our children and different things like that. It is our folks who are killing one another.
Mm-hmm.
But then we say Black Lives Matter. Now, Black lives do matter.
Yeah.
But it's only going to matter to everyone when it starts mattering to us. We have to start speaking up.
Right.
If you know better, you should do better. And so I'm not going to lay all the blame on her,
mm-hmm.
but she's a big part of the problem.
Right. And can we, let me ask you this, as we talk with Greg Jones of Johnstown, who lost his son about a year ago in November in Johnstown, one of many. Greg, I mean, the names, and I can't even recall all these kids, and somehow you have a connection with each and every one of them, and I go back to the young Andrews kid, Zach it was, back to then. And then the Jones kid, I'm talking about Eric, his son. Man, what does the black community have to do? Seriously, I know now you have a little bit of political clout on city council with 2 black council people. I think that's the first time ever in the history. What is the churches? What are they doing? What are the organizations like maybe the Elks, the NAACP? Do you know of any kind of strategy that they're setting up at this point?
Well, come November, we're very prayerful that Pastor Sylvia King and Ricky Britt will be elected to the council.
Okay.
They made it past the primaries, and they both made it in, and that was a really good feeling to know that these 2 individuals will possibly be sitting on the city council.
Right.
Now, when we talk about the black churches, it is not like it used to be. The church back in the day was our power station.
Mm-hmm.
It was not only where we got our spiritual uplifting from, but we also, it was where we protested and where we raised our voice through the church when things were going on in the community that wasn't right.
Yeah.
And we don't see that. Now, I must say, Pastor King has always been in the community.
Right.
She's always been out there in the community, as far as I knew. And then her mother was out in the community before she became really active. But the African-American pastors have to get it together. They have to start standing up. They can't just preach it from the pulpit, because these young kids are not even going to church these days.
Yeah, I know.
So you got to get out there and go where they are and let them know that there is an avenue here. There are people who care, and we got to lift up our voice. But when that doesn't happen, and they see that doesn't happen, then, their attitude is, well, nobody cares about me.
Mm-hmm.
So, why should I support these organizations? Now, the NAACP, he is stepping up. I've talked to him many times.
That's Brother Casho. Yeah, Brother Casho. So that would be Brother Casho, right? Yeah.
Yes, he has stepped up. He's been down to the Citizens Council meeting where we meet with the police chief and a couple of, like the city manager, a couple of other officials in Johnstown. So he's doing his part. But if change is uncomfortable, and if we want to be the change that we talk about, then we got to get out there and do it. We got to lift our voices up. We got to get registered to vote, and we got to get out there and do the vote. Come November, I'm very committed to, if you don't have a ride to the voting booth where you're supposed to vote, I am going to be committed to giving people rides all that day.
Right.
Get them out there so we can lift our voice. We have to become active like it was back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you can't hardly say nothing to a parent about their child without that becoming a problem. You know, if you got a child that's a problem child in the community and somebody confronts you about it, just listen. No one's trying to down you or say you're a bad parent. You just happen to have a child that's not doing right.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very approachable. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, you know, I've seen one of your children do this, that, and the other, then, you know, we're going to talk about it like mature adults, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be the keepers of the village. And if we can't even talk to one another, then how are we going to solve any of these problems?
And that was very much a part of our culture back in the 50s, 60s, and so on, as you say, the old days, or back in the day. And let me ask you this. In many instances, the African-American culture in Johnstown, and after being there 30 years, I found it to be kind of frustrating in that there's such a dichotomy. You have, well, let's just take, for instance, black churches. On any given Sunday, there are 10, 20 Baptist church, maybe 5, 6 Methodist church, and maybe independent denominations, and they're all separated by familial territory. I mean, my family grew up in this church, and that's why I continue to go to this church, even though there's only 20 people in this church, 80 people in that church. I mean, do you have a feeling like we're being neutralized and that the white man is basically saying, well, look, they're not really a problem because they can't even really get their own stuff together?
Well, you know, as the old saying goes, 11 o'clock on Sunday is the most segregated hour in America.
How about that?
And that's when, you know, and that's when everybody is doing their own thing in their own churches and not really looking at a plan to come together for the community overall. Mm-hmm. You know, and I challenge pastors. You not just you're a voice for God, but you're also a stature in the community.
Right.
People look to you. They need healing. They need prayer. They need leadership. And when you're not out there, you know, then that's what keeps them away from the church. Yeah. I hear a lot of pastors say, "Oh man, these pews are empty this Sunday," or you know, the young people just are not coming. Mm-hmm. Well, when you show them that you don't care, they're not going to come and support you.
Right.
You know, they're not going to come and support you. It's not like when we were growing up. Right. You know, that's where you was going to be. Yeah. If you took your behind out on Saturday night, you better have your behind in church on Sunday morning.
Yeah, sad to say.
That's how it was.
Yeah, sad to say that has changed, and I got to be quite honest, brother, that you know we've lost several generations in these churches. That's why they're so empty, and I gotta believe because in many instances, even our culture has been watered down, and I won't go into that. That'll be another subject for another time on the Greg Banks Show. But when it comes to the churches, not that I'm slamming them or being judgmental, but if you don't have the young people, the churches tend to die out. Somewhere along the line, there's 2 generations that didn't send their children to church. You understand where I'm coming from? You know?
Right.
And perhaps it wasn't. Our parents made sure that religion was a part of our fiber and our background. And when I say that, I'm talking about children who grew up primarily in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And after that, we pretty much lost them. So here again, neutralizing. I shared this with you the other day. Give you a good example. We had our own neighborhoods. Rosedale comes to mind in Johnstown. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, churches, Bethlehem Steel. You didn't dare speak out politically back in those days because you could lose your job. Neutralization.
Right.
Do you feel that's happening at all and a part of losing the power base in Johnstown and the folks just quite frankly can ignore you because y'all don't put your money in one bank so you can go out and buy a school or build any buildings?
Right. I mean, we have to, the problem is, people feel like, with social media, say the wrong thing on social media, you can go into work the next day, and lose your job,
Right.
because you said that. And it's not even particularly what you said.
Right.
It's the fact that your boss might support the person that you're talking about. So he feels that, you shouldn't have said, he or she feels you shouldn't have said that.
Right.
So we're going to let you go because, you have caused a stir in the community. And I think that's the biggest bunch of crock that I have ever heard.
Yeah.
We have opinions, and, as long as we're not talking about hurting someone, then we should be able to voice our opinion.
Yeah.
But if that boss liked that person or didn't like that person that you were talking about on social media, then it's okay. It's a double standard. We have a president who is the biggest bully in the world, not just America. He's the biggest bully in the world.
Your biggest bullshitter.
When he's the biggest bully in the world. So when you talk about him on social media, then you have to think about some of these people who are making these crazy asinine responses to what you say. We're not saying, nothing that's not the truth. They know this guy is a bad guy, yet they support him, and then they say, well, I'm not racist.
No.
Well, when you support everything that this guy does, and you sit silent when he talks about the different nationalities across the world, then I have to tend to believe that you are a little bit racist.
Yeah, I would tend to think the same thing. Talking with Greg Jones of Johnstown, who unfortunately lost his son a year ago in November. Just one of many shootings there. Greg, let's go back to the original focus just for a moment. You go through every day. It's got to be a struggle. Anytime you lose a child, I lost a child, unfortunately, to drug addiction many years ago. And, and I still think of how many days we've lost fishing or just kind of hanging out or helping to raise the family. Your thoughts, if you will, share those with us.
My days are still hard. But as time moves on, you never get over it. You just learn how to get on with it. And, my son left two beautiful children behind, a boy and a girl, and they're 3 years old. And, when they come by the house, of course, it's a lot of chaos because they have a lot of energy. But, it warms my heart to know that a big part of him is still here.
Yeah.
And I can see his personality or some of the things he used to do as a child. I can see it in them.
Just like
his son is just laid back like he is.
Yeah.
His son is just really laid back, and then his daughter, she was the daddy's girl. She was his heart, and she's funny like him. She says some of the funniest things, and you have to sit back and be like, wow, he is still here, but only through them. But, it is a struggle to get up every day, without your son, who you used to get that text from, the WYD, what you doing? And then followed up, well, can you give me a ride here, or can we do this or do that? And when he was alive, I ain't going to lie, it drove me nuts. But
he was your son.
But,
yeah.
He was my son, and I wish we could, turn back the hands of time sometime. But, God has a plan, and I have to, keep trusting and believing. And I'm human, and sometimes I fall off of that and I get angry. But, we have to trust and believe that God is going to work it out.
Right.
And that, that justice is going to prevail. And, but only through God. We can't get out here and be vigilantes and take revenge on our own. We can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I just pray for these people who did this to my son, and I pray because God can handle people far better than anybody in the world.
Yeah. How about that?
He can handle them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I put it in his hands. And when you kill someone with kindness, that's the best murder that you can get away with forever and ever.
Amen on that. And I tell you what, I miss Johnstown. I really am concerned about where Johnstown is heading. That is still basically my home. I was there 30 years. Now I'm back in my original hometown. And I got to tell you that not much has changed from a racial standpoint. There are very few of us. If you're familiar with Huntington County, just south of us, 12 miles away, is Mount Union. And I know, Greg, for a fact that perhaps you had an uncle or you had probably grandfather or somebody that fished our banks of the Juniata River down here. And we could tell you some stories about how they hung out in Mount Union, Pennsylvania. But we'll save that for another show. And by the way, Jack Daniel of Johnstown lived up in Prospect. Professor Daniel from the University of Pittsburgh, who is now retired, actually wrote a book, and it was called, I think, We'll Cross the River. And you need to read that book because what a tremendous book that Jack Daniel wrote about the relationships of all the folks from Johnstown who went to Mount Union to go camping. And one name sticks out in my mind, Henry Harris. And then we had the Cashaw brothers, Mr. Young. And like I said, I'm going to get Jack on the air someday, and we're going to talk about that. But, hey, listen, bruh, best of luck to you. Continue, to stand strong in your faith. And, I understand where you're coming from. You have to be the voice for your son and those who we've lost in Johnstown. So we'll keep you in prayer and hope that everything works out for you and the folks in Johnstown, because without those guys like you that step up and, of course, show up and show out, well, Johnstown, unfortunately, is going to be a dying city even further.
Right. And the most important thing is we have to get to the voting booth,
mm-hmm.
and we have to voice our opinion right there. And if we don't, then we don't have a right to complain. At least I don't believe you do. And, we have to exercise that voice through that ballot box.
Right.
And, I am going to support the candidates who will run against Kelly Callahan, because we need strong leadership
mm-hmm.
in the district attorney's office. There's too much going on. Too many families are losing loved ones, and we have no clear leadership through her. At least that's what we feel. When you look at Somerset County, Blair County, Westmoreland County, man, those prosecutors don't play. You don't come in their county and think you're going to go down there, kill someone, or run drugs without them showing out.
Right.
But we hear nothing from her.
Yeah.
We hear absolutely nothing from her. And it's just, it seems like it's so chaotic up there at Cameron County.
Yeah.
Now, I am not talking about the police. Through frustration, they're just as frustrated as we are. They want to do their job, but she's the top cop, and they have to go through her. And, she ties their hands up a lot. And I know that for a fact. I know it for a fact.
Yeah.
So they're just as frustrated as we are. So I encourage everyone who has some kind of frustration with her to get out there and vote if she is not the person that you believe she is. And then we have this other attorney Mike Delia. He was my son's attorney on his bogus gun charge that dragged on for 3 years. I mean, they continued this case. Every time my son would show up to court, they continue it.
Yeah.
They continue it. And the moment he wouldn't have showed up, and that's what they were hoping for, the moment he wouldn't have showed up, they would have put a bench warrant out on him.
Yeah.
But they let this bogus cop get over and do the things that he do. Now, this is the same cop that when my son was 15 years old, he pulled a gun out on him.
Yeah, this is Officer Sleaze that you're talking about, the guy that tried to break into the evidence room and get more heroin or something.
Yeah, this is the same cop. So he held my son's life up.
Yeah.
So if someone says to me, well, why wasn't your son out there trying to get a job? Well, he was. He was asked for interviews, to come to interviews for many jobs. But he had to be honest and say, look, this is what's hanging over my head, and I can't get rid of it because his attorney Mike Delia, didn't do his job. To me, that's some kind of judicial, there should be some judicial punishment for that.
Right.
His license should be looked at. No one allows a case to go on for 3 years, and then this same district attorney allows it to happen. She should have been through the case out. The first 2 times he didn't show up to court. He should have been through it out. But he was called for some great jobs, my son. But he couldn't take it because this is what was hanging on. So, yeah, Attorney Callahan didn't pull the trigger, and neither did Mike Felia. But I still hold them responsible for his life because they held it up, and he couldn't do nothing. He couldn't leave town like he wanted to. My brother had offered him to come and go out of town and different things like that, but
Right.
he couldn't because he had this cloud over him. So when we sit here and want to point fingers at the young kids in the black community, it's the law. It's the system here in Cameron County
right.
that keeps them tied up.
Yeah, and it's reminiscent of the Jim Crow days. And you know what? It truly still happens because we continue to build prisons. And guess what? Yeah, we're finding that we're not a part of the justice system, but it's just us sitting in these prisons. And that has to change. So, hey, Greg, it's always engaging, informative, and, of course, always interesting to talk to you. We appreciate your update. We wish you the best of luck. And, of course, I know you're going to continue to do some good works there in Johnstown. So keep up the great work and stay blessed.
Yes, sir, and you do the same. And thank you so much for having me on. And, we'll just keep up the fight until we just can't keep it up no more.